Welcome back, folks. I'm Frizz, and today we're going to be covering the free archetype variant rule from the Gamemastery guide. It's by far one of the most popular variant rules in Pathfinder 2e as a whole, and it can bring a lot of build variation to your games. I figured that since I've got a whole series going over how archetypes work and whether or not they're good, I might as well talk about the variant rule that makes archetypes super accessible to every single character. It's a pretty simple variant rule, but it can have a really significant impact on a campaign, so it's important to understand how it works, where it works well, so let's just jump right into things, shall we? First, we need to actually just talk about what this rule does on its most basic level, and that's pretty simple. Essentially, every single even level where characters normally get class feats, a free archetype character gets an additional feat every single even level that they can only spend on archetype dedications or archetype feats. That is literally all that this variant rule does, but it can have a fairly big impact on a character's versatility. A party with free archetype in place is going to be a lot more versatile than a party without it, because it means that they can take any archetypes that they want without losing any of the normal abilities that their class would grant them. So you can have, for example, a rogue archaeologist that loses no rogue abilities for being an archaeologist. So generally, archetypes are not as strong as the actual classes. So a character who takes an archetype is probably going to be a little bit weaker than a just character that's stuck with their main class. But with free archetype, that person who takes an archetype doesn't get penalized for it. Personally, I do recommend adding a little bit of restriction on what archetypes people can actually get for free, though, since not all of the archetypes are created equally or created for different purposes. As an example, the martial archetype almost has a feat every single level that you can take an archetype feat for, like I said, 2, multiple 4, a 6, an 8, etc. So you can take a lot of different feats with it. And a lot of those feats are all about combat, and some of them even help you out of combat. But if you compare this to, like, the archaeologist archetype that I mentioned earlier, Archaeologist doesn't have a lot of combat abilities. It gives a lot of kind of utility and kind of exploration abilities, but those are not nearly as strong as any of the martial feats. So if you have a party where someone takes a martial archetype and someone takes an archaeologist, then there is going to probably be a trend towards the character with the martial archetype being stronger than the archaeologist. Generally, Pathfinder 2e is very good about balance between people in the party. That's just how proficiency works. But this is a option for, like, kind of swinging it the other way, so I would be a little bit hesitant about saying take whichever archetype you want. I'd say maybe only pick a profession archetype, or only pick multi-class archetypes. Just try and keep people on approximately the same, like, power level, because the celebrity archetype is not very good, but boy is it flavorful. So if you force people to pick flavorful archetypes, then it works pretty well. As a general rule of thumb, the multi-class archetypes are the strongest in the game, so keep that in mind. If you have 3 people taking super flavorful archetypes and then 1 person taking a bunch of super powerful archetypes, then there is going to be an innate party balance. But just be smart about this and talk with your party. It can be fun to take some super strong archetypes with free archetype. But if the rest of your group won't have fun whenever you're overshadowing them, then don't do that. Just be smart and talk to them. Some groups will be okay with it, some won't. So it's up to you to determine how your group wants to work. With all of that in mind, then you're probably wondering when free archetype is actually best to use. And the answer is obviously depending on what your group wants to use it for, or why they're interested in it in the first place. But I personally feel like there are a couple of situations where the free archetype rule works fantastic. First, free archetype is fantastic when you have an adventuring party that is actually smaller than the expected 4 players. Combat can absolutely be adjusted to be better balanced for having fewer players, but out of combat, you're just going to be missing some utility that you would probably have otherwise. If you have free archetype, then someone might be able to grab an archetype that will be useful and fill a role that you don't have in the party. For example, you might not have a divine caster, so someone can grab a cleric dedication. So now they can cast divine scrolls. It's stuff like that that adds some versatility to a party that will probably be lacking it if you have like 3 or 2 players. And it's a lot less work to keep track of than a dual-classed character, which is substantially more complicated. The second situation that free archetype is fantastic in and is basically made for is when the premise of a campaign itself requires that the party shares some sort of abilities. This could be as simple as in a pirate campaign, everyone gets only the pirate archetype for free. Or, everyone wants to be a vigilante in a superhero campaign, so just give that to them for free. Paizo has actually done this themselves with the Strength of Thousands adventure path, since that is set in a school for wizards and druids, so everyone gets a free wizard or druid archetype, to explain why they're even there in the first place. And it also means that in that, magic school environment, someone can still be just as much of a fighter as they could in other campaigns, but they also have a little bit of a sprinkle of a wizard on top. In this situation, it's perfectly valid to say that everyone does not have a choice with their free archetype feats. They have to pick whatever archetype the GM chooses as appropriate for the campaign. But you can also just say that you remove the normal rule of having to take 2 feats from an archetype before you can take a different dedication. So, for example, in a pirate campaign, you don't have to take 2 additional pirate feats before you can take another archetype. So if someone wants to take, a Soul Forger and be a Soul Forger pirate, they could take the pirate dedication at level 2, and then take the Soul Forger dedication with a free archetype feat at level 4. You can just remove rules if it gets in the way of player fun. And I really actually recommend doing that because not everyone has to be the same amount of piratey pirate. They can be a little bit of a pirate, and that's all that they need for the campaign to work. The final situation that I feel free archetype is just made for is the most vague of them all. Basically, if you just want the party to be a versatile group of badasses, then free archetype is the best variant rule in the entire game. It's great for allowing players to feel cool, be flavorful, and just mess around with different builds without upsetting game balance too much. You can get something kind of similar with dual-classed characters, but that will actually upset the balance a lot more since dual-class characters are super strong, while free archetype is a pretty simple and small adjustment. Basically, if you want a group of paragons of people who are super strong, super good at what they're doing, capable of being a one-man army, then free archetype is a good thing for you. But if you're looking for a more low-powered sort of game, then first, Pathfinder 2e might not be the best system, because you can do some crazy stuff in this game. But free archetype will actually be detrimental because you'll have a much more versatile group, and in a low power setting, that might not be what you're going for. When it comes down to it though, you should just talk with your party, because the best campaign to use free archetype in is the one where everyone has talked about it and agreed that they should use it. So just be smart and communicate. At its simplest level, I just love the free archetype rule. It's super simple and it does exactly what it says on the tin. It allows characters to take archetypes that they otherwise wouldn't really be able to fit stuff into their build, but allows for some great flavor and just allows for people to express their characters in the way that they want them to. Archaeologist and gymnast and dandy, all of these are archetypes that people might not be inclined to take otherwise, since they are, quote-unquote unoptimal or not very good for combat and dungeon crawls. But if it fits your character, then free archetype is a great way to be able to get them without penalizing yourself for combat at all. So I just love free archetype. So consider it for your next campaign, because it really will be fun, and a lot of people are already using it, so it can't be too horrifically unbalanced. Thanks for watching this video, since it's a little bit of an experiment on my end. I'd like to get a little bit further away from strictly scripting my videos and covering a bit more about the system rather than just pure mechanics, so hopefully you all enjoyed this one. I am loosely following a script, so hopefully it's a little bit more entertaining as I'm going off on a bit more tangents and being a bit more expressive. Also, since I'm curious, what are your actual thoughts on free archetype personally? I know that I've personally used it in half the games that I've played in, and have absolutely preferred being able to use it over not being able to, but I know that I'm just one data point, and there's a lot of people that shockingly watch my videos. So, what is your experience with free archetype? Do you like it? Do you dislike it? What kind of characters have you been able to make with it that you don't think you would have been able to otherwise? Also, while you're down there answering that, I'd like it if you could like, subscribe, or just give me some feedback in the comments. It's the best way for me to understand if you guys actually like what I'm making or if there's any problems with it. Also, it gives me some sweet, sweet serotonin. Until I see you next, live a wonderful life.